Okay, so we will be moving past this on the screen because I want to get through the rest of the discussion on that isolation side and dealing with accountability, and specifically introduce to you the Cord app at this point. Some of you have already heard about it. Not many have seen these slides, but we'll go through that quickly. But the majority of the time I'd rather spend on Q&A. So this is where we have some of our best discussions here, and I want to find out what's on your mind. There's already been some really solid questions come through. So keep sending those in. And although this QR code will be gone, you can still use that one that's at the bottom of your handout there. And so make sure, whether you have a question yourself or you're going to give someone else's a thumbs up, just in case we don't have time to get through all of those. So if you haven't done this yet, scan that QR code to participate in the question and answer time. All right, so we just finished up, just to review, this slide right here, what's wrong with our accountability. It's not often enough, it's not honest enough, and it's with the wrong person. By the way, someone asked a really good question that's going to deal with that third one right there. We'll get to that in just a little bit. So now I want to introduce and show you how we, with the Cord app, have sought to solve this problem of these three things with our accountability and give a tool to the church. Now, how this came about is, again, you've heard a lot of my testimony, but at the point where I was finally desperate before the Lord to be satisfied with Him and only with Him, and I realized that the answer is coming from nowhere else than right there, and was as desperate as I needed to be, the Lord He met with me, but it wasn't just a nice fuzzy feeling and then everything was better. He was giving me action steps. He was giving me steps to take, showing me passages of Scripture I hadn't seen before, hadn't noticed. And Ecclesiastes chapter 4 was one of those. So I recognized, okay, I need to be daily accountable with someone at this point. But at that point, I didn't know anyone else who was struggling with this. At least not to the extent that I was. And but the Lord had that taken care of and had someone right there soon after that time that just bore his heart to me and told how he was struggling very much in the same way it had been for years. And so I asked him if he'd be willing to join a group, just the two of us at that point, and to be daily accountable with each other. And we had already started to work through what the scale would look like to make sure we are communicating everything and not just saying I did pretty well, but we're really communicating specifics. So we got that started in daily accountability, but the question came, how do you do this? Do you just send a text message? Well, we felt like that was too impersonal, and it's too easy to lie over a text or be not fully honest. And so we wanted a little bit more organic than that. And so we were doing phone calls for a while, but to try to align your schedule with another guy or two other guys in a threefold cord group was just almost impossible. We did it for a summer, but that's very difficult to be sustainable if you're trying to align schedules for a phone call each time. And so we started using an app called Marco Polo. And it worked fine for a while. There were some limitations to it. It worked all right. It was just a video chatting app that we used for that. But there were other issues like this. Now I'm trying to present this as a solution from the pulpit with a secular app that every time Pride Month comes around, they're getting really excited about Pride Month and sending stuff out. And I can't support that from the pulpit. So for that reason and others, just realizing what we could do with this to be a solution for churches in this area, we decided to develop our own app, and that is the Cord. So let me show you a couple of what this looks like when you jump in. I know it's going to be small as we go through this, but you may have questions from this, so feel free to ask those later. But just give you a brief overview. So when you sign on to the app, it will ask you, do you want to join with people you know already or people you don't know that we can pair you up into a group with? I always recommend the first one. Why? Because this is a tool for churches. And this is a part of discipleship, is what this is. And so if you can join with somebody you know in the church, then that works out so well, because this is just one aspect of discipleship. There's so many others. And so when you couple this together with the regular organic Bible studies you're doing and things like that, then it's much more powerful than if you're only accountable in this way with someone on the other side of the world that you don't know. That being said, it can work either way, and we've seen both be helpful. So if you do select to join with someone you don't know, and because maybe you're not connected with a church or something, and you're here, and I don't have a good church to go to. Well, there's a solution for that. You're sitting in it. But anyways, if that's you, if you do, it'll come to my dashboard and said so and so would like to be placed in a group, and so I'll look just based on the demographics we have, try to get you in with someone your age. That's men with men, ladies with ladies, and married guys with married guys, and single guys with single guys, that kind of thing. And then one of our coaches will call you. Just to follow up and be sure you know what you're getting yourself into, be sure you're serious about it, and we'll place you in a group with himself and some others to get you started before he just leaves you on your own. So that's how that works. We also do that and follow up with a phone call because to be sure you're saved. Because obviously, as we just went through in the 3 categories there, if you're not satisfied with Christ, none of this is going to work. And so what's the point? But there are plenty of unbelievers that are wanting to be pure, by the way. Obviously for different reasons, but there are books written by unbelievers, psychologists, and others who are trying to help break self-destructive habits. And there's books written, I've read them on them, but of course they don't have the authority and power we have and the ability to not just deprave ourselves from something like lust, but to actually be satisfied with Christ. Okay? So we want to make sure that somebody is on the right path that way. And we have seen people saved by joining the Cord app. And there was one in Estonia. A lady had joined, a young lady. She joined and asked to be placed in a group. So my wife called her up. We always follow up with those. And my wife called her up. It turns out she had just had a close friend pass away, and it was making her think about life after death. And she thought, I better get my relationship with God taken care of. Not saved at all, doesn't know the gospel. And she starts thinking, well, if I'm going to please God, I probably should get some of this sin out of my life. And so I should get rid of my pornography problem, she says. So she Googles apps to help with pornography. And she said, your app was the cheapest one, so I went with that. And so my wife's talking to her on the phone, walks her through the scripture. She happened to have a Bible in her language there. She spoke broken English. We had a Bible in her language. And my wife was able to lead her to Christ over the phone. And then connect her with a missionary we knew in that area, and it's just really neat. So there's been 2 in that case that have been saved over the app, but of course that's going to be our number one thing to check for with that follow-up phone call. But that can work, but recommended is if you say, there's a guy in church that it's not maybe that we've talked about this before, but why don't I go to him and just see if he'd be helped by this like I think I would be, and let's join and be in a group together. And be willing to be the first. If you just wait around for someone to come to me and ask me to be in a group, it's probably not going to happen. If God's telling you this would be something be good for you, that means He wants you to be the one to take the step and go and talk to someone else about it. Now you could go to your pastor, as I said, and say, Pastor, I'd be open if there's someone else that comes and wants to be a part of this. Then I'd be all for joining a group. Ladies, you could go to pastor's wife and ask her the same thing. Just tell them you're open. So you could do that. And if you're joining with people you just put their phone number in there and it will tie your accounts together and put you in the same cord. If you're in a cord, you've got 3 guys in there and then you're burdened for someone else, you can start a second cord. And then when you check in, you can send those check-ins to both at the same time if you'd like. Let me show you what happens when you click that check-in button. This prompt comes up and it has you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 in thoughts, viewing, and self-gratification. Now that scale is the exact same one we went over earlier, and the subtext you can't see from here, but the little gray text under that will tell you and remind you what was a 9 on the scale. It was to consider. What was a 7 or 8? It was to make provision for the flesh or to be unwise. So it will tell you that, so you make sure you're checking in everything and communicating everything that needs to be communicated, because again, if we breeze over that and don't communicate, what you don't communicate will not change. So that's how this screen works. Then you would click that record video to send that to the selected group that you have. And yes, it's going to record a video that is going to see your face. Just like kind of a FaceTime call, but it's not live. It records it and then sends it. And that is, again, to keep this more organic, more real. And it's helpful to be honest. It's harder to lie when your face is seen. Have you ever noticed that? And so it's totally an honesty policy that this is based off of, but it's just a helpful thing and much more real and organic if your face is seen as you're sending that to the others in your group. That video goes to your group and only to your group. There's no one else that can see that video. I can't see it on my dashboard. It goes nowhere else. Only to those individuals that are in your cord, and those are deleted every 2 weeks. So it's on a cycle and they're cleared out from the servers. every 2 weeks. Like I said, you can be in more than one cord, and if you wanted to, you could click that drop down and send the same video at the same time to more than one cord, more than one group. So if you're in several of them, you can check into all those at the same time. One more thing I want to mention on the previous screen, and that is the SOS button right to the left of the check-in button. This is one of the most helpful things about the app. So if you're in a situation, facing a temptation, and maybe you're alone, there's not people there with you, remember the goal of the app and the byline of this is never alone. That's what we learned from Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Woe to him that is alone. So we're never alone. And so in that point, you say, there's no one around, there's no one here. What do? I'm facing this temptation. Well, pull the phone out, hit that SOS button. It notifies the other people in your group. And it does two things. One, they can be aware, they can be praying for you. They could text or call you, but many times they don't have time, or they're not able to do that right away, or they don't see it in time. But I think the most helpful thing is that when I click that button and send that to the other folks in my group, I'm not alone anymore. They know that I'm facing a temptation, and then when I check in that night, I can't pretend like nothing happened. Oh yeah, today was fine, no temptations, all good. No, they know at 3:06 p.m. this afternoon, you sent out that SOS, and I want to know how it went, right? And so that helps me in the moment to know, okay, now they know I'm in a temptation, and I'm going to have to answer to this, and I'm not alone anymore. See, and that's the goal of this. So that is the helpful thing with the SOS button that is there. You can reply to other videos as they're sent, that are sent through to the group, but know this, that you only have 90 seconds to record in that video. And so when you're recording the video, which the point of that is to explain why you rated yourself that way. So you rate yourself in thoughts, viewing, self-gratification, and you say the reason that I gave myself a 5 in viewing was because I had a second glance today on Facebook. Now you could leave it there, or you could say, now because of that, I know where this is going, and so here's an action step to make sure I'm moving in the right direction for tomorrow. See, this isn't just a confession booth, and we're just checking in, our failure so we feel better about ourselves. That's not what it is at all. We're moving forward here. That's only going to happen if we have action, if we're putting action to this and taking steps. So if somebody does that in your group, by the way, you can have one-way groups where where you're just telling other people how you're doing and you never respond to everyone else. But the beauty of the threefold cord and this mutual accountability and cross discipleship here is when you recognize, man, someone else had a rough day, and you reach out and say, hey, you know what? Here's a verse that challenged me today. Can I share this with you? And you say, hey, you mentioned that you struggled on Facebook with your phone in bed with you last night. I can relate. And something that's helped to me is, don't you think maybe we shouldn't have our phone in bed with us? And so you help encourage them. There may be blind spots in their eyes that you're able to recognize and say, yeah, I think maybe you better take this step right here so that we're not as vulnerable in that area. So that's when we really see traction come, is when the groups are treat this less like a confession booth and more like a Bible study. And though it's not time for a Bible study, but in that I mean more like a discipleship. It's challenging each other and giving verses and things to help out. And there is time to do that in even 90 seconds, okay? But the reason that I recommend doing this with people is because though you're having this daily accountability throughout the week, it's helpful to have an in-person meeting. And some churches, I know of one church that has a time where after, I think it's a Sunday evening service, where all the accountability groups will meet together and in person, and a pastor can challenge them, or they at least can just have an in-person organic Bible study there together. And it's not just the correspondence over the app, because it is stilted, and it's meant to be stilted. This isn't a social media app and video chat just all day long type of thing. It's very short, and we give that 90 seconds to explain your day and we put that time limit because some would take 10 minutes or 15 or 30 minutes to explain their day. And then you'd be getting all these videos and not have time to watch them, and it just keeps things from being sustainable. And so we try to keep that right to that 90 seconds within there to be sure this is something everyone can do. I understand a daily commitment is a big commitment, no matter what it is. But it is the things that you do every day that change you and make you who you are. If you think about the things you do every day That's what defines who you are. And so why would something, this important, that's going to take maybe 3 minutes at the end of a day to watch the other videos and reply to them and send your own, 3 to 5 minutes tops, should not this be something that's important enough to justify that amount of time on a daily basis? Okay? So I run through that quickly because we've already discussed all the principles behind it. I just want you to see the tool that's there. Now, when you sign on to this, there's a 2-week free trial, and then it's $5 a month US, which I think we said was 7 something Canadian, or you can pay for the year. It's a little bit cheaper, and it ends up being like $60 for the year, something like that. And the reason we're doing that is because it is quite expensive to develop and to maintain an app like this. Now, original quotes as we were looking at it was going to be somewhere around, I think, 175,000 US was the first quote I'm looking at to outsourcing this, having this done. But the Lord put us together with a team of Christian developers with a production company in Michigan that did it for us for $60,000 done and out the door, which is incredible. Still a chunk of money, but that is an incredible compared to what that could have been. And that is paid for. The initial cost of it's paid for. But then there's ongoing maintenance. And the maintenance costs start, if we had one user on the app, it'd be $1,000 Canadian per month to keep this thing running. And then as you add users, that scales with server size and costs and everything. So it's quite expensive. And then there are so many things we want to add to this. Like, for example, Bible memory and the washing, the renewing of your mind by the washing of the water by the word is a huge part of this journey. What I'd like to do is have a Bible memory tool written into the app so that every day it gives you a verse and that you memorize that verse, recite it back to the app. It listens and checks you for accuracy, and then you can check that off on a daily basis. So you're constantly filling your mind, not just emptying it. Remember, that just creates a vacuum, but we're filling our mind with the proper things. And so that's something we could add in there. And there's more things. Some of them we are about ready to release at the end of next month. We should be ready to have a video from a preacher come through your feed into these groups once a week. A 3-minute video from some preachers I've discussed this with, and we'll be adding more to it. But that it's just a way to speak life into these groups, so it just doesn't become stagnant and I fail, you fail, we all fail. But you have a preacher in there once a week just to challenge, give a verse, and speak life into those groups. I think that's going to be a very helpful thing. And there's many other things we could go over that are possible future features that we can add in here. But every single one of them has a price tag, and so that's why we've chosen to spread this out for that small amount a month to each user. We have discussed the possibility of having a church pay a certain amount for a church license, and then anyone in the church can use it. But I've had several pastors say, if someone in my church can't sacrifice a cup of coffee a month for their own purity, they're probably not ready for it anyway. And that is absolutely true. I was in Kenya a year ago presenting this, and $5 US there is a lot of money. You think it's a lot here. It's a lot in Kenya, okay? And so I already knew that's not going to be manageable, so I was thinking we'll just make this free for anyone that wants to use it in Kenya. And I had a Kenyan national, a student there, say, don't do that. He said, what we do not pay for, we do not value. And he said, we pay more for our dating apps than that amount. So anyway, that being said, I think this is something that's manageable to spread that. I just don't want you to be surprised when you see the monthly subscription on that. If it is a problem for someone and you say, I can't afford that, I had someone say that last week, no problem. We will give you full access, no questions asked. You just tell us and we'll give you indefinite access on there. Won't charge you anything. So that's no problem at all. Good. I think that's it. I want to move to the questions now. Again, I told you that you'd be able to raise your hand as well if you have questions, but I'm looking here and I'm going to start going down through the list of questions that have been sent in. Give me just a second to approve these last few. Okay, let's do this. Hey, Steph, would you be able to moderate this for me? So you can keep that one hidden, but just as they come in, you might have to push that yellow bar. All right, so you should be able to see all the questions on your phone that are approved. Let me jump back over to that screen. So if somebody hasn't been able to do that yet, you can scan this and be a part of that. Submit your own question, give a thumbs up to someone else's, and I'm going to start right at the top here. I told Pastor to be prepared. Yes. There you go. I told Pastor to be prepared because if I get a hard one, I'm shipping it to him. So he needs to be ready for that. I also have my wife's uncle, Pastor Mark Gilmore, and his son Stephen here in the back, and they are speaking at a missions conference here, as they often do, and so there definitely could be questions that I shove your direction too there, Uncle Mark, so be ready for that. All right. Somebody started out with a really good one that has 10 people have joined on and saying, I want to hear an answer to this. This is very, very good question. Sometimes we cover this, sometimes we don't. But it is, should a wife be an accountability partner for her husband? I was speaking at a church in Michigan and on accountability, and someone raised their hand and said, well, we all know that a wife is the best accountability partner for the husband. And I had to carefully answer that. Now, we'll do that in several different ways here. Now, first of all, let's look straight from Ecclesiastes chapter 4, the picture of the threefold cord. That's what we're going for our accountability. Never alone, and it's supposed to, instead of being alone, it's supposed to look like this, okay? So we already discussed that this can't be a pastor, the picture is not one strong one holding up the other two cords. That's not how it is. Not one that's arrived that's super strong and is supporting the other two. This is the picture of mutual accountability, cross-discipleship, the picture of the church that's given here, even though it's pre-Pentecost, but I think is a great picture for it, is this cross-discipleship going on. So we already said, well, it wouldn't really make sense if one of these was the strong one that's arrived in purity and is trying to pull everyone up to where it's at. That's not the picture here. It's not practical for a pastor to try to keep everyone in his church accountable, nor is it biblical. Okay? But also, what about a husband and wife? So if this is a husband and this is a wife, then who's this? The picture here of a threefold cord, I don't think is that picture at all. It's not, for the other reason, it wouldn't generally be mutual in that way either. A wife doesn't want to, and it's not helpful for her to police her own husband. And even if she is so burdened to want to help in this area, and maybe she's trying to understand, trying to wrap her mind around it, for her to police her own husband really upsets everything we were talking about in that first session, about the man being the head of the home and leading out in this area. Can a man lead in his home even when he's on a purity journey? Well, yes, if he is following the biblical plan and getting help from who he needs to. But some men are only willing to talk about this with their wife, so it's forcing her to be everything for him in this way. I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it's practical. I don't think it's biblical. And for the same reason, we've talked about what about a parent with their kids? So I had a wife or a mom called me a few weeks ago, and she said, I'm really struggling here. My husband isn't really interested in helping out my son with his purity, and so I'm trying to do it, and I'm sitting with him for over an hour a day, just listening and trying to help and trying to understand and everything with this. And she said, it's just not sustainable. And I said, ma'am, the reason it's not sustainable is because you're trying to fulfill the role of accountability partner, mentor, and mother all at the same time. And the role of the accountability partner in this threefold cord is not trying to replace the mentor. It's not replacing the parent. It's not replacing the pastor. But they are different roles. And for someone to try to cover all three of those, I think is going to be frustrating at the least, and I don't think very effective to give that time that someone needs. So the other thing then with a wife being an accountability partner, do you remember the type of things that we're checking in? Like, it'd be one thing if we're just gonna, hey, I need to tell my wife when I have a relapse. Okay, well, yes, she needs to be a part of your victory journey. And there was a study done asking men who have seen sustained victory, what was the most helpful thing in your journey for purity? And they were given a list of things. And by far, the most helpful thing that they chose was a supportive wife. So it's not that she has nothing to do with this at all. But those things that we're checking in, like today, remember on Monday, I just considered it. I was considering it, and I was thinking, I was pondering, and I was thinking, yeah, it'd be really great to do that and go down that trail, but I know it's wrong, so I'm not going to do that. Well, already, okay, that's a small compromise that we're going to check in, right? Can you imagine a wife, if we're having to tell her each day, you know, I considered this, or I set myself up here, or this person walked by and that was a bit of a temptation for me there, and all these, and the second glance, and whatever it is, and that is going to eat her up, guys. It's just the average wife cannot handle that. So here's what I recommend. You have a conversation with your wife that's something like this. You lay out the scale, just like we've talked about, and you say, at what point do you want to know? Because she's the one you've wronged, so she's in the driver's seat when it comes to building the trust that you've broken, okay? And so you say, at what point do you want to know? Is it at the consider? Is it when I set myself up for failure and make provision for the flesh? Is it a second glance? Is it when something comes to me and I fall to temptation that came up? Or is it when I'm all out searching for it? At what point do you want to know? And she will tell you, it's at this point that I want to know, as long as I know that you're communicating everything to someone else. That's the key. Your trust building is the fact that even if she says, okay, I'm fine if you don't have to tell me every little thing, but when it gets to this point, I'm fine as long as I know that you're communicating everything to someone else. So let's say you're using the Court app to do that. There's something called a support contact. You can put your wife's email, like I have my wife's email set as a support contact. If I don't check in a day, she gets an email. You see the reason for that? Because I have a covenant with my wife. I'll tell you this much as long as she knows I'm telling everything to someone else. Well, then if she gets an email, she knows that that's been broken. Okay, so the consistency there and the trust building process, I still want my wife needs to be a part of it, and this is how we do that. She's a support contact, and so she knows as long as she doesn't get that email that I am following through and communicating everything to someone on a daily basis. And that's a beautiful way, I think, to build up that trust within a marriage without constantly eating her away with all the smaller things that need to be communicated. Kind of along the same line, should a wife periodically ask how her husband is doing with his purity, or wait for him to come to her? Now, this may be case by case in the relationship that you have with your husband, but here's the thing. Remember whose responsibility this is? And we spent that whole first hour talking about the responsibility of a man within your home. Who's done the hurting here? Who's done the offense? Well, you as the man. And so in this case, where a man has wronged his wife in this area, being unfaithful by looking at these things that he should not, now her trust in him has been hurt. So what needs to happen? Is it her responsibility to be calling and asking and checking in with him? Man, you were up late online last night, and so where does her mind go? I wonder what he's doing while he's late online. Or maybe you were supposed to be home by 10 o'clock and you don't show up till midnight with no explanation. She might be thinking, man, what was there at work that's drawing so much of his attention after hours? So here's the point. Should a wife need to be the one to ask her husband these things? Especially, men, if you're the one that has hurt her and wounded the trust, you need to be the one to go out of your way to heal it, to fix that. So don't allow her to ask the questions. Now, by that, I don't mean telling her not to ask. That means there's nothing left to ask because you're answering everything before it's even asked. When I get home late, hey, just so you know, I was out late because of this. And she may say, oh, you didn't need to tell me that. Just so you know. No problem. Man, I was late on my computer last night because I had this work to do and invoices to send out and these different things. Oh, that's fine, sweetie. I'm not worried about it. But just so you know, I want you to know. That's what I was doing. Don't let her mind wander. She doesn't want to ask you those questions. She doesn't want to have to do that. But she does want to make sure that you're keeping your side of the deal, that you are being faithful. And so whether she asks them or not, those questions are likely on her mind. Just last week, this was crazy. I was talking with a older gentleman, and we had been through the seminar, and he said he went home to his wife, and he said, I really haven't. I don't think there's much to improve on here in the area of pornography. And he said, there's just certain things that pop up here and there. And she goes, oh, really? Well, what sites are you on that are things popping up? Oh, YouTube, stuff like that. Really? Well, those things aren't, I've never seen those things pop up. And so they talk about that. But then she goes back and brings up 40 years ago. She says, well, what about those posters that when you were a mechanic were all over the wall? What about those? Were those a struggle? 40 years had gone by. They had never had that discussion. But guess where that's been? That's been on her mind the entire time. I wonder if he was faithful to me then. Or I wonder if those were a problem to him. I wonder if in the mechanic shop, if he was looking at those things, if he jokes about it with his buddies when I'm not there. She didn't know. And I said to this guy, I said, do you know why she brought that up? Because she's been wondering that this entire time. He goes, no, I don't think so. Guys, we don't understand how a lady's mind works maybe, but I don't think it's just them. I mean, that's kind of common sense. They're wondering these things. Don't make your wife have to come and police you. You take responsibility for it. There's also situations, like I mentioned, where a man is only willing to go and talk to his wife, and she's not allowed to get help and talk to anyone else, and I'm not going to talk to anyone else, and you're making her shoulder all of that. That's not the way it's supposed to happen, guys. Go to your pastor. Go to another man in the church. Get help in this area. Don't put all that on her. Someone says, what do you suggest if you suspect someone is in bondage regarding the purity issue, but you believe is not willing to be honest and intentionally covering their sin? So this could be a friend. This could be technically a spouse. This could be a child in this case. So first of all, you can't want the victory so much for someone else that it delivers them. They have to want it for themselves. That doesn't mean sit back and do nothing, but that just means that people can sometimes be very, very, very frustrated with people they're trying to keep accountable and everything. And so, maybe it's a dad with his son. And so you're trying to keep him accountable. And so you say, well, I'll call you once a week. My dad did that with me. I'll call you once a week. Well, or I'll talk to you once a week about this. And it kind of happens for a week and then 2 weeks, and then it just kind of fizzles out and doesn't happen anymore. Whose fault is that? My dad's? No. That's on me. That's on me. This is my responsibility. My dad wants victory so badly for me, but he can't want it. The moment that my dad wants it more than I do, it's not going to work for me. So this is where someone has to individually take responsibility for themselves and their own actions when it comes to this area of accountability. But I don't think it's a wrong thing, to go and bring this up to somebody and mention it. We talked yesterday, actually, in detail about how to do this with a child in a way that is recognizing, yes, there have been bounds that have been crossed, there's been sin that's been committed, but also that we're available to talk about this and to still maintain a safe place between, say, a father and son to deal with this issue. So it may be helpful to approach it in some way like this. If a dad is suspecting or a mom is suspecting a son is dealing with this, then to approach it in a way, I'll leave it up to you whether there's discipline or not or whatever, however the Lord leads in that case. But to speak to the issue, say, that desire that's in you is a God-given desire. It actually, in its proper place, is a beautiful and holy thing. And as your dad, I want to be there with you right now to walk you step by step to show you how God can use this in his proper place. It can be dangerous, yes, if it gets out of place. But if you just come in guns loaded, ready to just say, this is so destructive and blowing up families and all this and stuff, you're probably just going to shove it deeper and deeper into their hearts. But you've got to show them that this is something from God that has a proper place. Of course, that fire outside its proper place, man, yes, it does damage. But I want you to know that you can talk to him about this anytime. And put it on yourself. Say to your son, you find out your son's been looking at this stuff and had been in filth, and say, I wish that you had felt like you could come to me about this. I wish you could have. And I'd like to think that I've portrayed that I'd be open to that, but I must not have communicated that totally to you. And I want you to know, son, from here on out, I'm going to be there for you. And let's have a regular time that we're talking about this to deal with this issue. And you be a part of it. You can't go wrong just taking as much of the responsibility as you can in that point. But making sure he understands there's a safe way to come to about that. There's many more ways we could take that question, but we got to move on. Can you give more in-depth advice on how to find full satisfaction in Christ? So if you were here, a week and a half ago, I guess it was, when I preached the Wednesday evening service, we went to John 4, woman at the well, and I think the entire point of Jesus meeting her at the well was so he could use that picture of the water that will never run dry, the eternal water that he had to offer. He could use that picture to show her that satisfies, but all these men she's going to, they don't. They only gratify, and there's a big difference. So she had a God-shaped hole in her heart she was trying to fill with men, and it wasn't work. And she's going day after day after day after day to this well, the picture, going to this well of men to try to quench this thirst that's just not working. It's not quenching the thirst. And it's proven by the fact that she's already on number 6, her 6th guy, and she's not even married to him. I think she's not convinced it's going to work already. And so that picture there, it's the idea of replacement. And many times our addictions programs and things like this are just all about abstinence and get things out of your life and get rid of them. But that just leaves us with a vacuum. And if we don't fill that with satisfaction in Christ, how it was meant to be done, this is the same for single individuals and for married individuals, by the way. If you think, I'm single, I got to be satisfied with Christ, but when I get married, then I have a spouse. Well, if you're going to your spouse to be everything for you like Jesus is, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. They're going to let you down, right? And the best of them, best of spouses, would still let you down. They can't be everything for you. You have to be satisfied with Christ. So in what way does that look? Let me just give you one practical tool in this area. When I give my testimony and describe how that point of desperation, being told no for my wife Stephanie, where that led me to being completely desperate and on my knees before Christ and having nowhere else to turn, someone could say, well, that's nice for you. You had a big circumstance like that to lead you to desperation before Christ, but I'm not in that circumstance. And so you're saying I have to be desperate before Christ in order to be satisfied with him, but how do I do that? There's a tool that God has given us called fasting. Now, sometimes we think fasting is just a tool to take away food so we get hungry and then we remember to pray. And we say, well, fasting's there, so whenever you get hungry, you think to pray. And so we pray more, and we think that's what the tool. I think it's so much more than that. I think fasting is a tool to remind yourself, your body, of how weak you are, how desperate you are. And, when you do that and you skip meals for a day or for 2 or for 3 as the Lord leads, then you're constantly reminding your body that I am nothing. I mean, as men, how weak do you feel when you're hungry? When you don't have food, oh man, you feel so weak. That's some of the weakest a man will ever feel, is when he's depraved himself of food. We're not doing that to earn some favor with God. That's what the Pharisees were doing. It's not just to remind us to pray. No, we're doing that to put ourselves in the right position before God. I am utterly weak and helpless before you. And you say, well, I don't know if I can manufacture desperation like you had in your circumstances in order to get desperate enough to be satisfied with Christ. No, you know what you can do? God's tool of fasting. I had someone raise their hand in a church one time and say, can I give a testimony? I used to struggle with pornography, and they said, I decided to fast once a week. And he said, I've never struggled since. Why? Because he's maintaining desperation before Jesus Christ and his satisfaction with him. So that's what a practical tool in that way of being satisfied with Christ. All right. This is a deep one. A young man says he's attracted to men. How can I help him? I wish this was a question we could just skip over. But sadly, this is, it's more, I think it's more common than any of us know in this case. Now, I referenced this morning dealing with a lady who had lesbian tendencies. And I'd like to say a similar thing in answer to this question. If we have more and more men that are being attracted to men, same sex attraction, same with ladies, if that's happening more and more, then is it because something is different with our bodies? No, what's changing? Well, we're growing up in a further and further, more and more perverted society. And I think we can point to our nature and say, well, we must be, if it feels like I was born this way and this is how God made me is oftentimes alleged. And so we're putting the blame on him. Whereas it's not God that's changed. It's not even how God makes us that's changed. It's growing up in this very, very twisted society. Now, if you look at Romans chapter 1, there's a progression given there. So the progression ends when God gives them up to their own lusts. But it didn't start there. And I think some would say God giving them over to their own lust, well, that means they lost their salvation or they can't be saved anymore. I've been soul winning with people that have said that to someone who's about ready to pray and receive Christ. And then they said, well, what does God believe about same-sex attraction, in so many words? And this person I'm soul winning says, that's it. God can't save you. Given up to your own lust, we're out of here. And that person was so confused they didn't accept Christ. And it's just terrible. That's not what that verse is talking about. When that says they've given them over to their own lust, it means what was not natural is now feels natural. So that's why when we talk to someone, it's like, but it feels like this is just how it's always been. Like I was born this way. It's so natural. Okay, they've reached a point where it's like God's given them over to their own lust, but it did not start there. Where did it start? When they knew God, they worshiped him not as God. It has to begin with the rejection of their Creator, according to Romans chapter 1. That's where it begins. So if you're dealing with someone with same-sex attraction, bring them back to the point, hey, when was the point where you said no to God? There must have been some crisis, something happened in your life where you rejected. Something happened. And it's not that it's too far gone, but God is waiting there for him. And I think God can restore that. God can do that. I'm not going to claim that I understand this issue for sure. No way. I have so much to learn on this, and I have only limited case studies in what we've dealt with. But as I mentioned with this lady that says she sometimes struggles with men, sometimes with women, sometimes other twisted sexualities. It's like, I don't think her problem is that she feels like she was, born attracted to women. I think the problem is just perversion. It's perversion. She's not satisfied with Christ, so there's this empty void. The world says you need this, 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 and this. These will satisfy. And here's a woman who's just trying to fill it with whatever she can find. So ultimately, instead of trying to deal with all the psychiatry and everything involved in someone's mind when they feel like it's a same-sex attraction, and I'm not trying to downplay the fact that it goes deep, because it does. But instead of trying to downplay that, maybe just bringing them back to, hey, what would it look like if, forget who you're attracted to and all that, but if you were absolutely satisfied with Christ? And I'll leave you with one other thing to ponder in this area. It has happened where a man gets married, in this case, or a man gets married to a woman because he's gotten right with the Lord. He's wanting to walk in victory in this area, even though he's had some same gender attraction. And that feels most natural for him. But he gets back on track. He's following the Lord, and the Lord leads him to get married. He gets married to a young lady. And that lady is the first woman that he's ever sexually attracted to. That has happened. I'm not speaking on millions of case studies. I know of one instance that has been shared as a testimony where that happened. Okay, so there's an interesting thing, because at that point, he is attracted to one woman. Now, isn't that the goal? So we could spend so much time thinking, yeah, but is it still feel natural for him to be attracted to men? So surely he's, out of God's will, and because of this, well, it's not right for him to be attracted to a bunch of women, a bunch of men, or a bunch of women, any more than it's better for me to, as a married man, to be attracted to more than one woman, right? The point is, it's one focus. So if God gives him attraction for one woman, then that is enough to rejoice over and to move forward. See? And I think, well, what about the others? And I think that's just where it comes back to. Well, ask yourself as a man, are you attracted to women still, other than your wife? So it's an interesting point to be made on this, but I think God can do a miracle in this area. And whether that miracle is taking away all same-gender attraction, or whether it's giving him victory in that area, whatever feelings he still has, but yet as a part of the miracle, he gives him attraction for one. And if the Lord gives a woman grace to be married to that man, then that can be a beautiful thing. And as I said, I've seen it in that way. Okay, someone said, what do we do if spouses are not in the same stand? And I'm guessing they're saying if they have disagreements on this, in this issue. You really need to go for counseling on this one. You need to get with your pastor, because it's going to be different in each case, and I don't want to try to give an overall fix for this. Your pastor is going to have much more experience on this and be able to walk you through in that case. But how can two walk together except they be agreed? And it is not going to be an easy route unless you're able to, by God's grace, get on the same page in this area. I don't think it's right. The question comes up, what if a man is openly viewing pornography in his home, and obviously the woman, the wife is totally against it, but he will not repent, he will not get right, and will not go for help in the issue. Should the woman just stay in that environment that is in some ways an abusive environment? I mean, can you imagine what she's going through, and the guy seems to have no consciousness of what it's doing to her? That's an area we'll leave it to the pastors. As I said, we'll give them the hard ones and to deal with that, because that is not an easy one to answer, and maybe case by case. Is it best for a wife to be accountable to someone other than her husband, i.e. with covenant eyes, to avoid the husband seeing things that may be inappropriate? Okay, so they're referring to covenant eyes. The way it works is if it deems that there's something on the screen that's inappropriate, it's going to send a screenshot to the accountability partner. And it blurs it out so it's not super graphic, but it still could be a point where it could be triggering to somebody. So if a wife is struggling with pornography, should their husband be the accountability partner that receives those covenantized reports, is specifically where this is talking about. The same principle applies where we said for a husband, it might not be best if the wife is the accountability partner. I don't think it's the picture here. And so that would still apply as far as that daily accountability. But if you're talking about covenantized, then yes, I think it'd be fine to have another lady be that for you, ladies. So if you want someone else to be receiving your reports, then to put someone else in there, that's fine. So my dad is the one that receives my covenantized reports. And speaking of which, by the way, I try to have a conversation each week with my dad in this area of purity. Now, he's not the one that's in my group and daily accountable to. And like I said, my wife is a part of it in another way. But the role of a mentor still needs to be a part of this. And so I want my dad to be a part of this. And so I still try to do that with my dad and keep him involved. And I would recommend that for everyone. It may not be a daily thing, but a once a week, a time to connect with him, keeping the gravity in there with a mentor. Okay, I think this is our last one. Should a parent be an accountability partner for their teenage or young adult child? It definitely can work. I've seen it work. It can be a helpful thing, but I don't think it has to be that way. Remember the picture of mutual accountability that we have here. I don't think it'd be appropriate for mutual accountability necessarily between a father and his son, or mother daughter. I just don't think it's the picture there, because you do have more of a hierarchy of parent to children, and that's just not the picture of the threefold cord. So should they be a part of the victory? Again, absolutely. Yes, we have a feature coming out soon on the app, hopefully within the next couple months, that is a mentorship email. And that would be like I would put my dad or a pastor as my mentor, so that even though they're not in my group seeing every single video, they do at the end of the week get a week summary of how Ryan did. And it would say like, this is their hardest day. They struggled this way. Because of the data points we're putting in, it could very simply say, hey, he struggled worst on Wednesday. He had a second look there. Or he struggled with something that popped up there. May want to have a conversation. Well, what's the point of that? I already have guys I'm checking in with daily. Well, the daily accountability tends to be peer-to-peer. And again, we can get into that rut of just, I fail, you fail, we all fail, and so it's okay because we all do it. But if instead you have a mentorship email in there where that's going to somebody that is over you, has a mentorship role, or a pastor over you, it keeps the gravity to that sin instead of just becoming flippant. And I think that could be a useful tool for a parent with children, even though they may be within a school or whatever, a peer group. There may be young men that are wanting to challenge and encourage each other in this area, and that's fine. But to have yourself as the mentor, so that you're at least aware of things going on, and they know that you're aware and are still a part of the victory in that way. So hopefully that helps and answers that. And I'll just mention one more thing I mentioned yesterday to those that were here. I came across a pastor with his sons that I think his sons were probably the well, I'll just say I didn't sense they were struggling with purity at all. And there was nothing hidden. It was very clean in that area. So I went to the dad of these teenage sons, who was a pastor, and I said, what are you doing with your sons to help them in this area? It's remarkable. And he pulls out a report or questionnaire from his desk, and he says, we go through this once a week. And it's something that he's written, he's compiled, and it's a list of questions. Like, what was the hardest temptation you faced this week? How did you do with that? How could you have done better? And it just, I don't remember all the questions, but having that intentional report to walk through your sons on a daily basis, or on a weekly basis, or monthly, however you want to do it, but it's a regular time of intentionality. Another question we dealt with yesterday that's related to this is, how soon do you deal with this with your young people? I don't know. My son's 2, not yet. Okay? I'm definitely not speaking from experience. I'm only speaking from those that I've talked to, because I do ask this question a lot, and I'm constantly trying to get advice in this area. But here's kind of where I'm at right now. Again, your young person needs to know that they have a safe avenue to come and talk to someone about this, because otherwise they're just going to be ashamed back into that corner. They're never going to talk about it, and this is going to be brewing inside of them. But the hard thing is you don't know when they're awakened in this area. You don't know if they're struggling, so how do you address that properly? I would recommend having this conversation as your children are getting older. You say, hey, at some point, Johnny, you're going to start being attracted to young ladies. He's going to say, no, what? Yeah, at some point, that's going to happen. And they're in different ways, and there's some things that are going to change inside of you, and you're going to want to look at them, you're going to want to be with them. And Johnny, I want you to know that is God doing something inside you. There's a God-given desire there that God wants to use. So what we want to do, though, Johnny, is, because it could be used in the wrong way, as soon as you feel that desire inside you, Johnny, you come talk to me. Because I want to be there as your dad to help you with the next step. So as soon as you feel that means you're becoming a man. You're growing up inside. That's a big deal. All right, so you come and talk to me, and at some point, Johnny's going to see some girl, and whoa, never felt that before. Oh, I wonder if that's what Dad was talking about. I'm becoming a man. Let me go talk to him, see what I'm supposed to do. Okay, so you you term it that way, that it's not, just shaming him for feeling that way. But instead, you're encouraging him, come and talk and get help. Because if you can do that, and you can catch at the very beginning as those feelings start in his heart, then you can help mold and shape that and protect it for the right time. So I think if you have that, and if you already have a regular time where you're meeting with Johnny and maybe his siblings to discuss these things in purity, even if he totally doesn't totally understand it yet, then he thinks like, oh, this is what we're talking about on Saturday when we meet, and this is when I should bring this up to Dad, and there's already a proper avenue to do that. So intentionality, I think, is huge. As we discussed earlier, if you're not a part of the solution, you're a part of the problem. If you think that you can just sit back and the best we can do because we want to guard innocence and we don't want to introduce into something too early, we just do nothing, well, that can't be the solution. Because the world is trying to get to them so fast. And if you don't lead your child in this area, the world will gladly do it. The devil will gladly do it. So you've got to be there to take initiative as right from the beginning to do that. That's all the questions I think that we have here. So does anyone else we really need to wrap it up here, but any others just with a raised hand have a further question? Yes, Eric.
You have a success rate, from, say, men that are in desperation. Because, this is something that I think that I speak for most men, but that have, that have struggled with this for their lives.
Right.
And I see examples where when other men come up within churches that they're basically excommunicated or pastor of the church.
Sure.
Closes men to even talk a little more.
Right.
And so, when you see where there is true admission and men do go into a core together, what success rates are you seeing?
Yeah, that's a really great question, one we get asked occasionally. We're very early in this, so it's hard to do that. The court's been around for a year, and the purity journey is one that is a journey. Have you ever noticed, you'll hear testimonies about someone that says, I was saved out of drugs and alcohol, and it's like God just took the desire away like that, and it was gone. And I know a guy, I'm friends with a guy that has wife and kids, and he was a bouncer in a strip club, and I mean, just at the lowest low, addicted to drugs and alcohol and everything. He got saved, gloriously saved, and just the desire for the drugs and alcohol were gone, completely gone. However, he's in our church, and he is running the bus ministry and everything. But he would tell you in testimony of a time when he was caught in this area of viewing. And it was his daughter that walked in on him in that, and he gives it as a testimony. It's a powerful testimony. Now the Lord has delivered him from that. But why didn't that happen when he was saved? I thought God took out all that away from him. And I'm not saying I have the answer totally to that question, what's different about it, but drugs and alcohol are not God-given desires. Sexuality is. God's not going to just take it away from you. And so there is a process of retraining this into its proper place. And I think that's a portion of it and why this would be a journey. So I say that to say everything might be gone in a year. But I did just talk to a guy, and we actually had a testimony when we were in Prince Albert. There was 2 guys in the church there that have been on the app for a year. Both of them gave testimony. And one of them said, I got on the court app and started daily accountability last May. He said, I have not looked at pornography since. Been done. And so for him, that's likely the thing that was missing for him in that area. Now, if somebody else gets on the app and say, well, it worked for him, but you're not satisfied in Christ, it's not going to work for you, right? This is the, if we'll take the entire counsel of God in that area and desire, availability, and isolation as we went through, well then yes, we can see success in that area. But it's also learning, because you're going through and you say, man, I'm vulnerable in this area. And so you tighten that up, and you say, I'm not going to be on YouTube or whatever. You take a step there, but then the devil gets you from this direction. And so, okay, all right, and you don't make the same mistake twice. And so you're correcting that, because eventually, if you don't make the same mistake twice, then eventually you run out of mistakes, is the idea. So wherever the devil's getting you, you're tightening that up. And it's a learning process. and as well as just a journey in that. So I can't give a statistic on how many, but I do. It's encouraging after having this out for a year, I think starting to get feedback from people that are saying this has been life-changing for me. Yeah. So get on the app, share the app, but don't share it without Christ because it's not going to work and they'll blame us. Okay? It does not work without Christ. It wasn't meant to work without Christ. That's not the point. Actually, it was Pastor Gilmore's father here that had a statement. He would say, it ain't everything, but it ain't nothing either. And I think it was to Stephen, he might have said that, or maybe it was Jonathan, I don't know. But I think as you look at these areas we've talked about, in each one of them, desire, availability, and isolation, some people would say, well, there's a way around it, so I'm not going to have filters, or I could be just dishonest with my accountability, so that's not everything. Well, it ain't everything, but it ain't nothing either. It's a part of God's plan for your victory, and if you expect to see victory, you're going to tighten up in each of these areas. So as we conclude, pull out that slip of paper, and if you haven't already, I want an action step in each of those three categories: desire, availability, isolation. If you say there's already something I'm doing in that area, then write that down if you're already tightened up in that area. But we're not going to leave here vulnerable. And if in that last area of accountability you say, I don't really have anything ready like that, doesn't surprise me, most of us don't, then I would highly recommend the Cord to be a part of your journey in this way. Highly recommend it. As I said earlier, sometimes it's disappointing because we'll get all thrilled and excited in these seminars about what God wants to do, and then there's really just 1, 2, maybe 3 that end up following through on this. Don't be that one. Don't walk out of here not being changed by what God's taught us here today. And so take those action steps that He's led us to. I'll be in the back there, and if I can be a help to anyone in one-on-one conversation, we will have brochures out there about the Cord app, and then again, we'll have this out there if you say, well, this, maybe it's not for me, but I want to help other people. If someone tells us that they can't afford this, then we cover it for them. And if you say, I'd like to help, cover that for people that can afford it, then that's what that would go to, that and development. So you're welcome to do that if you'd like. It's been a privilege to be with you guys. Thanks for all your time, and some of you having heard this 2 or 3 times in different avenues as we've been in different places. So I appreciate that and your patience. And let's go ahead and close in prayer, and then I'll turn it over to Pastor. Lord, I thank you for what you've taught us here and let us in, and just the remarkable amount of people that have come out to be helped either for themselves or to be able to help other people. And at least we can recognize that those that are here see this as an issue and are not in denial, as so many people are not in denial of the issue, but they're also not calling these issues, they're not calling good evil and evil good, as many are in this way. And so thank you for that, Lord. And this, continue to give us a thirst for righteousness in this area and in others, to continue to grow in you. Would this be an avenue of Victory Baptist Church and the other churches that are represented here, in which we, as we get desperate for you in this area, that we learn to be satisfied with our Creator, satisfied with our Savior. And help us to do that, Lord, to continue to follow you in every way. And we ask this in your name. Amen.
Sharing this with us. Just want to encourage you to take those next action steps where God has led you. And if I can help you, you're a member of our church or attend here, if I can help you in any way, please let me know. Somebody mentioned about people getting kicked out of church for getting into pornography. That will not happen here. We want to help you. And Victory Baptist Church is made up of people who have been saved from a life same-sex attraction. And one of the biggest things is to understand that the nature of lust is we have natural lust and we have learned lust. And homosexuality is same-sex attraction is a learned lust. But our culture today, our society, wants to degenerate mankind and humankind down into an animalistic desire and identify us primarily based on what we are attracted to and what our identity is. Well, what do you identify as? Well, if you are a child of God, being born again, your identity is Jesus Christ. First and foremost, that is your identity. And when you find satisfaction in Jesus Christ, you realize that His plan is best for you. Even though, to be honest, a lot of times God's plan, as revealed in Scripture, doesn't always fit into what I want right now. But when you recognize that God's plan is best, and the desires that He has given you are designed to be fulfilled in a right way. And your identity is not what you are attracted to. God can change that attraction. You can learn to be attracted to desire what God wants for you. So, but this, I know some people say God can't save homosexuals. I've met many people. I've heard even more testimonies. People who were enslaved in sin in that way. God delivered them. And just because you have an attraction does not mean that has to be lived out. So anyway, just want to share that with you as well. If there's anything that I or my wife or Pastor Trevor can do to encourage you, please let us know. I'll try to find the answer from God's Word. If I don't know, I will call Brother Gilmore again. But I do so appreciate you coming, taking the time.